Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Will Reed, founder and CEO of Cannaplanners. Thank you very much for joining me today, Will.
David, what a pleasure. Your radio voices. Wow, chef's kiss.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. If you want, you could leave the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Well, thank you for the compliment, Will. I really appreciate it. But, focusing the attention on you a little bit here, how did you get involved in the cannabis industry?
It was not quite a fluke, but it was totally timing.
Okay.
So the long story, slightly less long, is I was a professional working for somebody else in a town where there were lots of companies kind of doing what we do, which is provide specific service to a specific vertical. And I was watching them succeed while simultaneously going through that, what hippie astrologers call your Saturn returns, right? Where I was feeling like, is this what my life is going to be? Do I have to clock in every day? Which I think are telltale signs of maybe you're an entrepreneur when you're like, I hate it here and I'm smarter than everybody here, which I'm not, but that arrogance. Anyway, so I was feeling kind of stale in my job. I was noticing these companies performing really well. One of them around that time was being purchased for its second time for $1 billion. So I recognized that the business model, there was potential there. And also, so I live in Vermont. Around the time that these ideas were happening and I was feeling stale at my job, Colorado had maybe been legal for less than a year, but around a year maybe. And I took a trip out there just to see what that was all about, to see, I was going through all the motions. I was like, maybe I'll buy a gas. I was just trying to figure out what to do to like find purpose. I'll buy a convenience store, or I'll run a retail shop, or I went through like literally everything in my brain. Like, how can I have more control over my own life and the feeling I want to have from kind of purpose, from feeling like I have a purpose. So that's kind of, that's the, not how I got into cannabis, but but how I got into thinking about it for sure.
Well, so I have to say, when I was approached about doing this interview, you were described as a nomadic musician turned Apple tech whiz turned cannabis industry marketing titan.
Wow. My PR guy needs a fucking raise. Am I allowed to swear? He needs a raise. That's not inaccurate. I definitely, I think that was part of my problem when, being employed finally was like, I had kind of already lived this life of, tasting what it's unsuccessfully, but tasting, getting that taste of, autonomy and kind of self-fulfillment, right? So yeah, when I started a band in college, and we took it on the road for many years, like 5 or 6 years. While I was still in while I was a senior in college, we started going out on the road, and somehow by the luck of the draw, I still graduated from college. But yeah, we took it on the road. That's actually how I got to Vermont. We were young hippie musicians who really loved fish. And when you're in, the northern part of the country and you're in a band and you love fish, where do you go? You go to Burlington, Vermont, right?
Oh yeah. That's honestly, when you said, all of that was leading to me to ask, like, the follow-up question was, okay, so you're a fan of fish.
I mean, you see the poster behind me, don't you? It's a fish poster. Yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. They're big, still are a big part of my life. But more so when I was younger. But definitely influenced by them and influenced by kind of that carnival atmosphere, of being a fan, right? And going on on the road and following this band around was like being in a circus. So at that time I thought maybe I could do that, and I did for as long as I could, you know. But that is how I got to Apple. So I worked in the music industry for a small, brief period of time between uh, being in the band and working for Apple. But that was also around the time of the economic collapse of 2007, 2008. So like most of the music industry, at least that I knew, that had survived Napster and survived, the internet, they were all gone now. That was the straw. Um, so I got a job at Apple, and it was actually a means to an end. Like I was living in New York City, and I had a girlfriend that I really loved, who I eventually married. Um, and we lived in the city, and this thing happened. The economy crashed, and I had to go live in my parents' basement for a minute. And I got a job at Apple, and I was like, there's Apple stores in New York, and I bet if I like crush it, I can get a transfer. And that's exactly what I did. And the cool thing about being in a band and then working for Apple in New York City was like, for some reason, my managers were like, the logic they came to was like, oh, you're in a band, you probably know how to deal with famous people, so you can be our celebrity shopper. So, I worked when I first moved back to New York. I worked at the Cube on Fifth Avenue, and you know, got to meet some cool people and sell them iPhones. And that was like that. My time at Apple was really important, not necessarily because of the celebrity part. That was fun, but it was because like I think it helped me mature, not only as a human being, but like it helped me mature my professional outlook of life. I think I was still really insecure before working for Apple. I was really insecure about what it meant to be a salesperson. Like I didn't my growing up, my dad's like, "You're gonna be such a good salesman one day," you know. And to me, that was like, that sounds gross, man. Like, what are you talking about? And I didn't realize how broadly speaking that could be applied. So working at Apple, I understood the correlation of sales and relationships, right? And in fact, my title for a while was relationship manager. I worked on the business development team, and I was a relationship manager. So all it meant was I sold, you know, computers to businesses, but I did it through developing relationships and like trying to figure out what they wanted and asking them questions and about how they'd be using equipment and, you know, those sorts of things. And you just kind of become like homies in some capacity. Like, I'm trying to solve these problems for you, and I'm going to be as cool as possible while I do it.
Well, it sounds like things are going really well at Apple. At what point did you have that notion that, hey, maybe I want to strike out on my own?
So we lived in New York for a while. I worked for Apple the whole time, and my girlfriend, then fiance, then wife, now former wife, we decided, we wanted to leave New York. We'd been there for, I think between the two of us, 8 or 9 years. I was there for 7 years almost, and it was time for a change, and we decided to move to Vermont. So it was really just like a lifestyle switch. We're like, let's just get out of here and move to the country. And she was working for Fox Sports at the time. Like, we both had really corporate jobs. And then we moved to the country, where it was like, our neighbor was a maple syrup farmer. You know what I mean? It's like that. So it was a different way of life. So I got a job for one of these companies that I was describing to you, which is the web services company. Um, I happened to work with summer camps. That was, one of the things we did. And I would go to summer camps around New England, and I would sell them websites. I would teach them about, like, literally teach them about the internet and how, their parents of campers are going to be finding summer camps by searching, and what is Google, and how are all these things applicable to the business you're running. But like I said, at that time, I was watching all these other companies similarly to the one I was working at do far more amazing things. So I was there for probably 3 or 4 years before, and I started Planners while I was there. It was probably one of the reasons I was asked to leave, let's say, to put it politely.
Okay.
But it was because I was, my I did really great things at that company. I was the director of a department. I drove profits. We did really well, but my attention started to wane as soon as I realized that like I didn't love summer. I went to summer camp growing up for sure, but like I had no passion for these things. And not necessarily like I have some sort of crazy passion for cannabis. I'm basically a lifelong user, basically a daily user. But it was a combination of things. It was the passion. The thing that drove me was there's an opportunity in this thing that I happen to really care about, which is cannabis. I also happen to be really good at building relationships and figuring out how to problem solve based on my time at Apple. I also the other thing that Apple taught me, which I brought not only to Canna Planners, but I hope I'm bringing to the industry, is our outlook on brand and what that means, and why customer service and customer experience is really important. So we do a couple, and maybe we'll get into this, but we do a bunch of things here. Some of them are analog and some of them are digital. But really, what we're trying to do with all of them is help our customers create an experience for their customers, make it memorable, make it so they want to come back. So I was at that company for a couple years I took that trip out to Colorado on a vacation. While I was still working at that company. I started putting together what would be our web builder while I was still at that company. And then I got asked to leave. And for any like entrepreneurs listening, this is like a really important lesson I learned. And for any entrepreneur, I'll pass it along to you. You guys can do with it what you will. But, I think leading up to me being fired, I felt like I was in control of what I would do, meaning like when I was comfortable and ready, I would quit my job and I would start doing this thing, called Canna Planners. And the universe had a completely different plan for me. And I set myself up for failure. I take full responsibility and accountability. But, once I didn't expect to be fired, regardless of me taking responsibility right now. I didn't see it coming. And when it happened, I was like, shit, I got rent to pay. I got a wife. I got dogs we got to take care of. We got bills to pay. Like, what are we going to do? And, I gave myself that afternoon to feel sorry about myself and like, be down. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, screw this. Like, let's go. And the worst thing that can happen is I fail and I have to go start applying for jobs. And so far, I haven't had to apply for a job.
How did you set yourself up for failure? It sounded like things were going really well with the.
Well, I just mean,
camp.
yeah, it was going well. I just mean like I set myself up for failure in that, like, at that place, like as that version of myself, I wasn't doing my future self any immediate like good. I was going to get fired from this job for sure, which I guess my future self did okay. But like, I'm just saying, like, I wasn't doing myself any favors in kind of ensuring that the way I thought the universe would play this out would happen. Right?
Mm. Oh yeah,
Does that make sense?
Nothing ever goes according to plan.
No, and thank God it doesn't, because like I said, like that day I was like I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed. My wife and I shared a car, right? So I had to call her up and be like, hey, I need you to come get me because I just got fired from my job. And like, I'll tell you, David, I hope this never happens to you, but it's like one of the most embarrassing moments of my entire life. I've been around, I've done a ton of embarrassing things, but this is just like one of those moments where I was like, I can never let this happen again. I don't think that I can let someone have that kind of control over me. Like, nothing against I deserve to be fired. He should have fired me. But like, I never wanted to feel that way again. Yeah.
Well, so tell me about Canna Planners. What do you guys do?
Totally. So we are a full service creative and digital marketing agency specifically for the cannabis industry. When I first started this company, all we did build websites, and we only built them for CBD. At that time, CBD was popping off, so it was a really good way to kind of test the business model. I thought it would be the business actually, but it was a good way to test the business model, make sure that there were opportunities, and also at that point, Vermont was a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of, like, we were ahead of the farm bill, so we were planting hemp, CBD hemp in Vermont like crazy before most of the country was. So I think in like the first year, 18 months that I was full time with Canopy, I was doing Canoplanners full time. I think Vermont had something like 8 licenses, and then 18 months later, there was like 800 licenses for people to farm hemp. So it was like wild. So there's nothing like a total saturation of a market for people to figure out like how they need to differentiate themselves. So we started with the websites. Then I found an opportunity to integrate kind of creative services into what we do. We keep it pretty simple here. We make beautiful things. We put those beautiful things online, and then we do a couple things. We do SEO, and we do loyalty, retention marketing. That's it. We don't touch social. We're not doing programmatic for our customers, because they're kind of a liability in some respects to this industry, right? Maybe this has happened to you, but like, a lot of my clients get their their Instagram or Facebook profiles taken away. There's nothing I can do about that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like just throwing sand into the wind. It's just going to come right back in your face. So we try to work on things that actually work. Like, how can we improve your physical presence? Like, how can we make sure that you stand out, that your products look cool, that you're actually aligning with your customers? And by the way, who are your customers? Do you even know? It's not weed smokers, right? It's a group of people who smoke weed. But so how do you figure those out? And then how do we make this web experience something that's equates to what's happening in the store? How do we capture new people? How do we make sure we bring them back? Those are the things that we focus on. And since CBD, we've now grown. We're now in every single legal state. We now work with people in every single legal state. We work kind of around the world. Yeah, we're busy, dude.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly sound busy. And yes, I definitely know what it is like to be in Facebook jail and not even have a chance at getting out. And
Yeah.
I definitely understand, when you're sort of in that rut professionally, and sometimes those things come to a head and you might not have been expecting it, but like you said, it's not the worst thing.
I was going back to that, like something that was really important to me is so simple. Something that was really foundational to me in starting this company and even thinking that I could, because like beyond like having a band, which is for sure entrepreneurial, it for sure takes logistical management. Like you gotta know how to budget gas and getting to a place and getting paid and contracts, and like, so for sure, like I had kind of some experience, but I was like a kid doing that stuff. But I started listening like whenever it started, I don't know, 2012 or 2013, I started listening to How I Built This, the Guy Raz podcast, the NPR podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he was interviewing like people I really respected, like companies that I loved, like the founders of Instagram, like, you name it, he interviewed them. And there was a couple common threads that I pulled from almost all of these podcasts, which were almost none of these founders had an MBA, right? Almost all of these founders, as a highly ADHD person, I know my own. Almost all of them are ADHD. They're all like have a weird kind of broken brain that doesn't have uh, the the education that I thought you would have to have. Like I thought a business, I thought a founder was like Zuckerberg, basically. Like you have to be so hyper analytical. Those were kind of the people that I would chalk that up to. But then I started, Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx or something like that. And like she was like, yeah, I was just a kid and I saw a problem and I like all I did was like not quit. And I was like, that's all it takes is like you just don't quit, you just don't stop. That's it. And that podcast was so hugely important to me being like, oh, like these guys are they're successful and they're not idiots, but they're like me, like they're just stubborn.
Yeah. No, that is I would say that is a key character trait to successful entrepreneurship is being a generally stubborn disposition.
Totally. Totally.
So getting into your work in the industry, you know, is there a way to normalize cannabis marketing and branding, even though it's sort of an uneven playing field when it comes to rules and regulations?
Totally. I think like for me, when the company first started, like our superhero power that we wanted to, give to the world was normalization. When I took that trip out to Colorado, I was not impressed. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me, which coming from Apple, which is arguably the most impressive retail experience. Definitely, they have the biggest market share of any retailer on the planet. So definitely the the bar. And when I went to Colorado, it was gross. The stores were gross, like literally dirty. The packaging on the products was at that point non-existent. The security process at that point was like intrusive. There was no part of it that made me think, oh, this is cool. I'm going to stop going to my, you know, the guy I buy weed from, and I'm going to start going to stores. It was like, no, ugh. So part of what I wanted to do, and everything was, at the time had the green cross. It was like that green, and everything had pot leaves on it, and everything was called something just like stupid. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like all the
something buds with a Z.
exactly, like something like that. Stony McBonies, like whatever. It was just like they all had these. The business acumen, not surprisingly, was fairly non-existent. Most of the people at that point were coming from a legacy background, so it's not like they had the experience of working for Apple and drinking the Kool-Aid of like what a brand is supposed to be and what even is a customer journey, like what even does that mean, right? So leaving Colorado is like, I think this is, in terms of like how I can impact experience, creative, digital marketing, like those are the things that I'm good at, like that I understand. um I think I can maybe steer this, at least my clients who come to me, to think about this in a particular way. So when the company first started, like normalization was our superhero power. We wanted to, like, if you came to us and said, we want this covered in pot leaves, we would generally say no. There used to be rules. Now, I'm not saying we didn't use that green or we didn't put pot leaves on things. And for sure, we have our fair share of clients with names that I'd love to rename. But you set yourself up, like you set a certain standard for yourself because that's how you feel like that's the impact you feel like you can make. You're like, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to like this specific thing, right? And if you recognize my cockiness, my arrogance, and believe that I know what I'm talking about, we're going to come out of this with something unique. And it's not going to look like every other dispensary next to you. And it's not going to have the same experience. And you might not even have the same products, but you'll understand what customer experience is and why it's important.
So when you go to your clients, Stony McBonies, and you're trying to normalize them, what's
Yeah.
the process?
Yeah. So I started taking an extra. So Stony McBoney called me, right? And they're like, hey, Will, we want to do all this, especially if they're a new business, which is the majority of our customer base. You know, I'd say, I'd explain why, but I'd say something like, you got to change your name. Unless you are Stony McBoney, why are you that? Like, who are you? Who particularly are you talking? Like, Stony McBoney is totally fine, right? But you got to know to whom you're speaking, right? right? If you're in the middle of you know, an urban area and you have a specific type of customer persona who lives in the neighborhood who is trying to find you, and you're speaking to somebody in a different state, like to a persona in a different state, you're not going to do yourself any good, right? So you have to first understand like who you are. And it's not easy. It's, like it's really hard to be introspective. It's really hard to personify a business, but that's kind of the approach we take. We pretend that, Canna Planners is a person. And if Canna Planners were a person and we walked into its apartment, like what art's on the wall and like what kind of music's on Canna Planners' playlist, and like, who else is coming over, what type of people is are coming to hang out with Canna Planners, like, so it's a bit of personification. Like, let's make this a person that you feel like you can be proud of. But a business is kind of like a kid, right? Like when I don't have kids, but when when you got a kid, the first 10 years you're dressing that kid and it's listening to your music and what, whatever. But eventually that kid gets a personality, it develops on its own. And at some point, like, it matures, right? And the same thing happens with a business. You can start out even doing exercises with a company like mine, trying to figure out who we are, who our customers are, like what's our vibe, how does that play, right? But it could be totally different, the next year, because you've matured enough, you've actually met your customers in the field, you've gotten feedback, so there's always room to grow. Yeah.
Is it better for a cannabis brand to lean into being itself, or is there a formula where if you're this and this, it'll work, rather than wholly being
There's no
yourself?
formula. There's no form. I would say, I mean, I don't think there's a formula. I would say we're formulaic in our process, but there's no formula to this, and there's no silver bullet, for sure. But I would say if I were to generalize the one thing that I think, and I this is what I do with I hope I do with Canna Planners, and the culture I hope I'm building here. Like, authenticity is the most important thing. People are generally not stupid. So they'll see right through a marketing spin, no problem, right? Um, if you are authentic, we try to play on really honorable traits, your authenticity, your empathy. Um, it's less about how to move the most products, right? Versus how do we be authentic in ourselves and hopefully move the most products.
Okay. Okay. Um, you know, what's working when it comes to cannabis branding? Are there general themes that you could share with our viewers and listeners that, let's say are the low-hanging fruit that could work when they're looking at addressing their branding issues?
I mean, when it comes to, yes, absolutely, for sure. I'll obviously apply it to the things that we do. Having a website is really easy. Having a good website that converts and is accessible through search is less easy. And it's a full-time job. I employ, 25 people to do these things, right? So I would say consistency in voice is important. Consistency in how you deliver your messaging is super important, but it's consistency, especially in cannabis. Like, apply like the cannabis growth to any other industry. It's like not the same. Imagine in your town, you woke up one day, just outside my door, there's 7 dispensaries within a mile. Imagine if you woke up and there was, 7 dentists right in a row, or like literally anything else, right? It's just, anyway. So the competition is high. The saturation in any new market is generally high, depending on some of the barriers to entry. But so I would say, like, be authentic in how you develop your voice, and your voice is everything from like literally how the words you use to like your logo and your packaging and what your store looks like when you come into all those things are parts of your voice, right? So there's that. Make sure it's good, and good is subjective, but good just means consistent. It's got to be good, right? The website has to be good. If you have a Squarespace logo in your website, like, I'm maybe not taking you too seriously as a business, right? There's easy things that you can do that uh, the internet's been around long enough that there's almost a psychology to it now. Users know good and bad UX like immediately, and this is called a bounce rate, right? So if you look at your Google Analytics for your website and you see something called a bounce rate, that just means how quickly does someone bounce from your website. Like, they come there, they're like, ugh, and they leave, right? Or they come to you on a phone and your website doesn't work on a phone, which is 80% of all of your traffic, right? And they're like, gross, leave. And they go to your competitor. So there's things you can do that are work. They're for sure, it's for sure work. Your SEO needs to be strong. When people are like, the way shoppers, how do you shop when you want something near you, David, and you're in a new city?
You just say this near me.
Exactly, right? So
Yeah.
this is a core tenet of what we do, and it's not only like retail near me, but it's also like consumers are becoming more aware of the types of products they want, and maybe even the brands they want to search. So we're optimizing our websites for all that stuff. And then the last part is like, okay, I built you something that looks cool. I built you a website that attracts people. We're providing SEO services that's driving people to that website and then converting them and getting them to come into the store. Now what? Now they've left the store. Now what? So the last part of that is that retention marketing. So we're communicating with that customer all the time, all the time.
Okay. What can operators do from an SEO standpoint that works, or is that do you take care of that for operators?
We do that for operators. Yeah. So, I mean, geez,
One thing
there's so many things.
Well,
Let
so
me
one
let
thing I'm
me
curious about.
let me
One,
demys. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
no. One thing that because I know from an SEO standpoint, like some people recommend blogs or thought leadership pieces to bring people
Yes.
in, but then you talk to the other side. People on the other side of the argument that says, no, I don't want people coming to my website for blogs. I want them to come because they want to buy things, and I want them only to come to the things they can buy. So,
Yeah.
what is your take?
Both of those things are true. So it depends to the extent to which, again, um, there's a bunch of things that play into those things in particular. One I would say would be like market share. So is that like a small mom and pop shop, right? Or do they have aspirations to open up many stores, right? So so building kind of the thought leadership content, just blogging, let's just call it blogging, is for sure important if your strategy is larger than just converting someone to a customer, right? For sure, the most important thing is converting them to a customer, right? You can do that on a blog post too, because people are, like, so a new, not every state is legal, right? And generally, when a state flips, there is a huge bell curve of education that happens, especially with an older demographic, right? Like, they might not know the difference between resin, rosin, and hash. I don't, right? Or why do I want a vape cart versus a pre-roll? Or this is so stupid, but like, it's one of our best, we have a blog that's the difference between indica and sativa that has like hundreds of millions of impressions, right? But those are educational pieces that basically it's all part of the customer experience. So like, yeah, like you can maybe just want to sell a pre-roll on your website. Easy. Like, for sure it should do that. But like, if you're trying to retain that customer and maybe through trust, right, you provide them something more. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So like stores fall on the spectrum of like convenience store to Apple store. And probably you've been to both of them, right? Like, you walk in and it's like, a bodega that sells, it's a really small dispensary versus you've been to the other ones like, Planet 13s in Vegas that are like huge experiences and have like a bar in the back, it's like a whole thing. They want you to stay there. It all depends on the journey you're trying to give your customers. And I think like the people who are trying to be around for a substantial amount of time, who are trying to build, let's call them generational businesses, are thinking a fuller picture than just transactionally.
You had mentioned that most of your clients are new to the market. Is there a particular reason they're just a better fit, or is it because more established brands sort of already have a digital marketing strategy?
No, I mean, we work with plenty of established businesses too. I think just again, like we try to be in states as early as possible, and depending on the state and the regulation setup, there's either a appropriate, realistic barrier to entry or an impossible one, right? Like think about like Florida versus Vermont. Vermont, if you got $250, you can apply for whatever kind of license you want, or whatever it is. It's under $1,000. You don't have to have anything. You don't have to be liquid in any way possible. So in Vermont, we have small boutique, 1,000 square foot grows. We have 30,000 square foot grows too, right? So that barrier to entry is small. In Florida, you got to have $1 million cash in, ready to go. You have to have as many leases on potential retail storefronts ready to go. You have to have capital to open up a business within whatever it is, 6 months of obtaining a license, right? Like that's a crazy barrier to entry. Like the capital necessary for that is ridiculous, right? So like, and we're marketing. Canna Planners is marketing to both of those people because to me, both of them are providing an experience. They're completely different, but they're trying to provide an experience. So going back to your question, I think the reason why, and maybe it's not even a majority anymore, it's probably split. But I think like because of the creative work that we've done, I would say that that's more attractive to new businesses than existing businesses. That most of them don't have this stuff. With existing businesses, they're generally just trying to capitalize on whatever's happened in the past. Like it's, we bootstrapped all this. It's time to do it real. We've not invested in digital marketing, and now we got a competitor who just opened up a half mile away who's like, that's all they're doing, right? So
what kind of investment are operators looking at when it comes to getting serious about digital marketing?
That's a great question. Well, let's talk about like a full cycle digital client of ours, right? Again, if it's a single shop, they can probably spend under 20 grand a year, focused on digital marketing, maybe like a little more than that. But for larger, for places with more retail locations, everything we do is based on the storefront. So the more storefronts you have, the hypothetically, the more we're doing for you. So we've got clients spending $0 with us a year. We've got clients spending, $50,000 a month with us. It all and maybe up, depending on how many locations they have. So yeah, we're what we're trying to do is, through the relationship, through all the stuff that that you've heard me talk about, that building that relationship, we got to be damn good at what we do, like facts, but we're also providing that experience. We want our customers to feel like they're heard and that we understand their business and we understand who their customer is, because they invest a lot in us, taking it, carrying out a lot of these tasks. So yeah, it could be a lot. It could be a lot, but the other value add that we provide aside from like the services is like we're reporting to all these customers, right? We're talking about the strategy for each location. The strategy for your Denver location might not be the same as what's going on out in Boulder or Golden, you know. Um, so the strategies are all different. So we're also innovating quite a bit. Every year we innovate like crazy. We just rebuilt our entire platform. We've rebuilt the kind of the data products that report back to our customers all the stuff we're doing. Um, yeah, we're trying to constantly innovate.
Do you run into any difficulties in the market? Because it seems like right now there are, let's say, a lot of people that dub themselves digital marketing experts.
Yeah. The proof's in the pudding, dude. Like it, everything to me is vibe. I don't know if you shop this way, but like I shop by vibe. When I go buy a car, I'm not buying a car. I don't give a fuck about the car. I like literally nothing. What I care about is like, did this guy listen to me? Like, did he pick the right thing for me? Is he making me feel like I'm heard? Do I not feel like crap doing this transaction?
Yeah.
So yes, I would say luckily for Canna planners, our competitors do a lot of selling for us.
Okay. Okay. How do you
Yeah,
sell?
we're just, and I'll be clear on that. Like, it's not like the product's got to be good. The service has got to be good. Like we got to, like I said, we got to be really good at what we do. We also have to be really good at dealing with those customers. Right, the relationship side of it. That's a specific thing. There's all of it is customer service. Right. So if there's one thing my employees hear always from me, it's customer service, and we are trying to constantly define that because it's like a rotten fish. When you smell it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
good customer service when you have it.
Yeah.
And thankfully for Cannaplanners, like for whatever reason, and this isn't just with competitors or anything. Like I see this, it happens frequently throughout. People just don't understand what customer service really is and how to provide it. Right.
Yeah.
So that I mean, that's the most important thing for us. And I know like there are a lot of digital agencies out there. There's tens of thousands of people who will hit you up on LinkedIn telling you that they're the greatest SEO person ever, and maybe they are. Um, but here at Cannaplanners, it's a little more familial than that. I think again, like we try to take something that's not interesting. If you boil it down, like websites, SEO, like it's complicated. It really is. It's like your eyes could glaze over immediately, right? So there's a certain je ne sais quoi that I hope my employees give to, and that je ne sais quoi, I do know what it is. It's customer service.
With the importance of providing that vibe, how meticulous are you when it comes to bringing on new talent and making sure that they're a fit?
Oh, I love that you asked this. So, like, I don't know shit about building a company because I'm figuring it out every single day. And thankfully, we've seen some success. We're doing okay. So I have to figure out how to hire people, right? And in the beginning, when I had my business partners or the initial first hires of this company, like they didn't go through the normal hiring process that a company would take, any other company would take you through. It was like, oh, you're available, you're interested, you're ambitious, come on over. You'll do it for free, even better, right? Like, so those initial people, like that was easier to me. But in the last 2 years, we've had to really learn how to hire people, and we've been learning how to do it by failing at it. So there have been people we brought on that just weren't the right fit, ultimately, because they might have been good at, the task that we hired them for, but they just weren't, there was a disconnect in how they were engaging with our customers, and it just wasn't there. Right. So yeah, man, it's really hard to hire people. It's really hard to find the right people, especially when you're like your Venn diagram is kind of complex. Like I need someone who is, for example, a great developer who fits my budget, who also like not a crazy person, and you know there's all these things, and it's like ultimately it boils down to the culture I'm trying to build, and that is purely foundational to the people who are a part of that. So yeah, it's really hard. We've gotten better at it. We're getting really good at it.
No, it is. As a small business owner, it's or running a small business, you get very protective, right? Because I mean, you had made the
Oh,
comparison earlier about it being your baby, but it truly is.
yeah, it really is, and it's hard to um if this sounds classist, I apologize. I don't mean it to be. I'm just separate. There is for sure a different psychology in it, like the way between being an employee and an owner. And now that I'm an owner and no longer an employee, I totally understand it. The arrogance that I had at when I was an employee, being like, "Oh my, I don't, my, I could do this better than my," like that feeling is total bullshit, obviously. But there's nothing that made it more apparent to me that when I said to myself, "Put up or shut up," because like there's nothing simple about it. Every problem is unique and nuanced and constant. Um, so yeah, so that analogy of the baby, I mean, frequently I talk to for my employees, the customers are that baby, right? Like that I can get they can wrap their heads around. But for me to like be like those people are I need you to take care of customers because they're important. But the real reason I don't know that I could ever explain. I don't think that anybody would ever get it unless, they owned a company and they understood like, yeah, this is a baby. Like you're an employee and you're coming here and you're getting a paycheck, but there's also 24 other employees and I'm signing for that paycheck. And I have to make sure that like your customers who you're dealing with don't hate you, right? And leave, right? So there's like all these, there's so much nuance to it. Um, in kind of, I used to call it manipulation for good. It's that thing, David, when you're like just starting out and you're like, let me paint you a picture, and we're going to be rich. And actually, not that we're going to be rich, but we're going to, this is going to work,
Mhm.
right? We're going to be
Yeah.
the best. That is manipulation for good. Like, especially in the beginning when you're bootstrapping and you have to convince somebody to do something for you that you can't pay them for, but you need it done. Do you know what I'm
Yep.
talking about?
Oh yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So that thing goes away when you have more than five people working for you because they're like, fuck you, dude. Like, what are you talking about? You run it like it's all here. But yeah, none of it's automated. Like none of it.
Has Planners scratched that entrepreneurial itch for you?
For a minute, I thought like maybe I could be a serial. So yes, I don't feel particularly entrepreneurial anymore. I feel like a business owner now, which is sad in some ways. Like, you know, I tried to do it for a minute. Like in a bunch of years ago, I started a soda company with my friend, right? And I would work, a bunch of hours at Planners, and then from 5 to midnight, I'd go to the co-pack and bottle soda and pack it up and throw it in the back of my car and deliver it the next morning, And it took me 6 months to be like, oh, this is not sustainable. If I want Planners to be the thing, which I do, because like it's it's basically all I believe in, right? Like all my chips are in the Planners basket. All my eggs are here. Um, so yes, I'm not saying like I won't be entrepreneurial, like I won't be an entrepreneur. I think at some point I'd love to, come to that stage where I can help young business people like when I was starting out and invest or be a mentor or something like that. But so now, like, I'm no longer really, I don't really consider myself an entrepreneur anymore. I'm now like the CEO of this company.
You still playing music?
you see the guitar behind me. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved in a couple weeks. I pick up my dog hates when I play. It's so stupid. Like I'll go into my room and close the door, sit in my bed and strum my guitar and you know, play a Beatles song or whatever. And my dog will like bonk her head into my room, sit down in front of me and be like, stop. I try to, like I will say of the many bittersweet aspects of being a business owner, the impact that it has on your identity, I would say is one of them, right? So like, I'm no longer Will Reed, singer-songwriter, part-time entrepreneur, husband, dog owner, this, that, skier, this guy, that guy. Like it's all I do is this pretty much. Right. So it's important. Bezos, who I know is terrible, but he's got a great outlook on work-life balance. I don't know if you've ever heard him talk about this, but he basically says there's no such thing. And I completely agree with him, right? The work-life balance is a fallacy. And you'll realize that if you love what you do. Because you're like, oh, I'm just living my life. It's all life.
Yeah. No, I guess I haven't looked at it under that lens. Like I have a great work-life balance because I love what I do. So I feel balanced.
Exactly.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Totally.
Well,
and I think like anybody observing my life would be like, this guy needs a hobby. He needs a girlfriend,
Well,
But
I wish I could
we'll
help
get
you with
there.
that, but the idea
We'll get
of
there.
dating right now is terrifying to me.
Dude, it is weird. It is. I'll tell you what. Being, maybe this is a different podcast, but yes, it's totally weird. It's definitely weird. Being 44 and like, updating my Hinge profile.
Well, Will,
But it's
thank you
fun.
so much. Thank you so much for joining us and telling your story. I mean, before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or your work at Cannaplanners?
I'm if I hope this doesn't sound contrived because I'm truly saying it with 100% authenticity, but I feel not every day and not all day, but most days I feel immense gratitude for the opportunity to like serve this industry. I love this plant so much. I always have ever since I was 12 years old. I've loved this plant. It has had it's, probably still a big part of my identity. So I'm just really humbled and honored to like be able to do what I do. I love it. I really do. And if you ever want to hit me up and talk about business or being an entrepreneur or whatever, like I do love talking to business owners and entrepreneurs. Like I'm happy to give you my 2 cents, which I have.
Well, Will, thank you again for joining the podcast, man. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, David. Anytime.
All right, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right, for Will Reed, founder and CEO of Cannaplanners, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.